They laughed at my worn-out helmet like it was a piece of trash, called me budget girl in front of everyone. What they didn't know, that helmet had seen combat at 40,000 feet, and when the truth came out, their smug faces crumbled faster than their fragile egos ever could. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been mocked for something that meant the world to you, then stay with me. Because this story, it's about to get real. And before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe because you're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Lennox Reed, and 6 weeks ago I walked through the glass doors of Vertex Aerospace for the first time as their new logistics coordinator. 29 years old, wearing a blazer I bought specifically for this job, carrying a leather bag that still smelled new, and clutching a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. This was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to be normal, to be civilian, to finally stop looking over my shoulder for threats that didn't exist anymore. But here's the thing about fresh starts. You can't have one when you're still carrying the weight of who you used to be. And I was carrying all of it. 7 years in the Royal Air Force, 7 years as a fighter pilot, the last 3 as a squadron leader, responsible for 12 jets and 24 lives every single time we took off. I'd flown missions over hostile territory that I still can't talk about. I'd made split-second decisions at Mach 2 that meant the difference between coming home and becoming a statistic. I'd earned medals I keep in a drawer because looking at them makes my chest tight and my hands shake. So why was I here, in a corporate office, pretending to care about supply chain logistics and quarterly reports? Because after 7 years of adrenaline and danger and purpose, I didn't know who I was without the uniform anymore. The military gave me structure, identity, meaning. Civilian life felt like floating in zero gravity with nothing to hold on to. My therapist said I needed to find a new normal. My bank account said I needed a job. Vertex Aerospace felt like a compromise, still connected to aviation, but safe, grounded, boring, maybe, but that's what I thought I needed. On my first day, I made a decision that seemed small at the time but would change everything. I brought my flight helmet to work, not to show off. God, no. I wasn't ready to talk about any of that. I brought it because I needed it. Because some mornings I woke up and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror, and holding that helmet reminded me that I was real, that I'd done something that mattered, that I wasn't just drifting. The helmet sat on the corner of my desk in my tiny new office, scuffed and faded and honest. It wasn't pretty. The paint was chipped in places where debris had hit it at ridiculous speeds. The visor had scratches I could map like constellations, each one a memory of a mission, a moment, a choice. There were burn marks on the back from a close call I still have nightmares about. The padding inside had molded to the exact shape of my head over hundreds of hours in the cockpit. It smelled like leather and jet fuel and sweat and fear and triumph all mixed together. To anyone else, it probably looked like junk. Like something you'd find in a military surplus store and wonder why anyone would keep it. But to me, it was proof. Proof that I'd survived. Proof that I'd been brave when it mattered. Proof that the woman sitting in this corporate office, feeling small and lost and ordinary, had once been extraordinary. I just didn't know that 3 people were about to make me wish I'd left it at home. The first time I saw Rhiannon Cole, she was wearing sunglasses indoors. Not because the fluorescent lights were too bright, but because she could. Because at Vertex Aerospace, being the VP's daughter meant you made your own rules. She had that kind of confidence that comes from never being told no, never facing real consequences, never having to earn anything. Her boyfriend Dax was right beside her, all expensive cologne and perfectly styled hair, the kind of guy who probably practiced his smile in the mirror. And then there was Bryn, trailing behind them like a devoted disciple, already laughing at jokes that hadn't been told yet. I noticed them because everyone noticed them. They walked through the office like they owned it, and technically, Rhiannon kind of did. But I wasn't interested in office politics or power dynamics. I just wanted to do my job, keep my head down, and figure out how to be a person again. It was my 3rd day when everything changed. I'd left my office door open during lunch, a habit from the military where closed doors meant something was wrong. I was in the break room, microwaving leftovers and trying to make small talk with a guy from accounting who clearly didn't want to talk. When I got back to my office, I knew immediately that someone had been inside. You develop instincts for that kind of thing when your life is dependent on noticing when something's off. My helmet had been moved. Just slightly, but enough. And there were fingerprints on the visor. I didn't think much of it until I checked my phone and saw the company's Slack channel absolutely blowing up. Someone had posted a photo of my helmet with the caption, "When you shop at Grandma's garage sale." The comments were rolling in, laughing emojis, skull emojis. Is this a prop from a World War II movie? Budget aesthetic going hard. Please tell me this isn't real. My face burned. My hands shook. That feeling I knew so well from combat, the spike of adrenaline, the narrowing of vision, the decision between fight or flight. It all came roaring back. But this wasn't combat. This was just people being cruel because they were bored. And somehow that made it worse. I found out who posted it 20 minutes later when I saw Rhiannon walking past my office, phone in hand, laughing with Dax and Bryn. She glanced in, saw me looking, and didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. She just smiled. A slow, satisfied smile that said she knew exactly what she'd done and she didn't care. I wanted to say something. I wanted to march out there and tell her that helmet had protected my head during a mission where I pulled 9 Gs and nearly blacked out, that it had been with me the night I lost a wingman and had to keep flying anyway, that every scratch on it represented a moment of courage she couldn't even comprehend. But I didn't, because that's not who I was trying to be anymore. I was trying to be normal, professional, the kind of person who let things go. So I closed my door, deleted Slack from my phone, and sat there holding that helmet in my lap while my coffee went cold. The leather was warm under my fingers, familiar and solid and real. I traced the biggest scratch with my thumb, remembering the mission that caused it, remembering who I'd been when I wore this, and I made a choice that I'd regret for the next 2 weeks. I decided to stay silent. I decided they weren't worth the fight. I decided to prove I could take it, could be above it, could be the bigger person. I had no idea that staying silent would only make them bolder. Silence, I learned, is not strength. It's an invitation. And Rhiannon, Dax, and Bryn, they accepted that invitation with enthusiasm. It started small. A nickname here, a snicker there. Helmet Girl became my identity before my actual name ever did. I'd walk into meetings and hear it whispered. I'd pass by the break room and catch it in conversations that died the moment I entered. They said it with just enough volume for me to hear, just quietly enough to have plausible deniability. It was calculated cruelty, the kind that leaves no evidence but cuts just as deep. Then came the exclusions. Team lunches that everyone knew about except me. Project emails I was mysteriously left off, only to be asked later why I hadn't contributed. Birthday celebrations in the conference room where I'd walk by and see everyone gathered, laughing, while I sat alone at my desk, pretending I had somewhere else to be. The isolation was surgical, precise. They were cutting me out of the social fabric of the office, thread by thread, until I was barely hanging on. But it was the group chat that broke something in me. I only found out about it because someone's phone buzzed on the conference table during a meeting, and I glimpsed the notification before they snatched it away. The Discount Brigade, that's what they'd named it, and I was the main topic. Screenshots of my outfit choices with commentary, photos of my 10-year-old car in the parking lot with crying, laughing emojis. Speculation about whether I shopped at thrift stores or just had terrible taste. Every insecurity I'd ever had about not fitting into this polished corporate world, they found and exploited. I started dreading work. Me. Someone who'd flown into combat zones without hesitation, who'd made life or death decisions before breakfast, who'd stared down enemy aircraft and never blinked. And I was afraid of going to an office job. The shame of that was almost worse than the bullying itself. 2 weeks after the helmet incident, everything came to a head. I'd been assigned to present a logistics report to the executive team. Finally, a chance to prove my worth, to show I belonged here. I'd spent 3 days preparing, perfecting every slide, anticipating every question. This was my moment to be seen as competent, professional, valuable. Then Rhiannon scheduled a critical marketing review in the same conference room, same time slot. When I arrived to set up, she was already there with her team, laptop connected to the projector. I stood in the doorway, printouts in hand, and felt my stomach drop. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have the room reserved for the logistics presentation." She didn't even look up. "Marketing takes priority. You can reschedule. The executives are expecting me in 15 minutes. "Then I guess you should have confirmed the room." Now she did look at me, and her smile was poison. "Not my problem, Helmet Girl." Something snapped. I walked into that room, right up to where she sat with her perfectly manicured nails on her designer laptop, and I said the words I'd been swallowing for weeks. "I need this room. This presentation matters." She stood up slowly, deliberately, making sure I had to look up slightly to meet her eyes. "You know what your problem is, Lennox. You think you matter here. You think anyone cares about your little reports or your sad little helmet or whatever broke, desperate life you came from." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "You don't belong here. Everyone knows it. Just quit already." My hands were fists at my sides. "I've faced worse than you. You have no idea." And she laughed. Actually laughed in my face, sharp and bright and cruel. Then her hand shot out and shoved my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled backward into a chair. "Worse than me? You're nobody. You're just some girl with a beat-up helmet pretending to be important." I didn't report the shove. I didn't tell anyone about the conference room confrontation. I just rescheduled my presentation, delivered it to a half-empty room 2 days later, and went back to my office where my helmet sat on the shelf, a silent witness to my humiliation. I was breaking piece by piece, and the worst part was that I was letting it happen. The woman who'd commanded a fighter squadron, who'd earned the respect of every pilot under her command, was cowering in a corporate office because 3 spoiled bullies made her feel small. That's when the email arrived. It was from the CEO's office, marked private and confidential. My hand trembled as I opened it, expecting another reprimand, another way I'd failed to meet their standards. Instead, I saw this. "Squadron Leader Reed, we would be honored if you would speak at our annual Aerospace Innovation Gala about your distinguished service and your transition to the civilian aerospace sector. Your story embodies the excellence and dedication Vertex stands for." I read it 3 times, then I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding like I was back in the cockpit preparing for takeoff. They knew. The CEO knew. Someone in leadership had done their homework, had seen beyond the logistics coordinator title to who I actually was, and they wanted me to speak, publicly, at the company's biggest event of the year. The gala was 3 weeks away. I had 3 weeks to decide if I wanted to keep hiding or if I was ready to own the truth I'd been running from. 3 weeks to choose between staying small and safe or stepping back into the woman I used to be. I sat with that email for 2 days before I responded. The fear was real. Fear that talking about my service would make me vulnerable, would open up wounds I'd worked hard to close, would change how people saw me. But there was something else underneath the fear. Something that felt like anger, like fire, like the part of me that had never learned to back down from a fight. I accepted. The moment I hit send, I felt something shift. It was subtle, like the first hint of dawn after a long night. I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet, wasn't ready to announce it or make a big deal about it. But I knew, and knowing felt like power I'd forgotten I had. Of course, Rhiannon found out about the gala before I could tell anyone on my own terms. The company announced it in an all-staff email, Annual Aerospace Innovation Gala, black tie event, special keynote from a decorated military pilot. She was at my desk within an hour, Dax and Bryn flanking her like bodyguards. "Did you see? A real fighter pilot is speaking at the gala." Her emphasis on real was deliberate, cutting. "Daddy got us VIP seats, front row to see what actual excellence looks like." She leaned against my doorframe, examining her nails. "You should come, Lennox. Might inspire you to aim a little higher in life. Maybe learn what it takes to actually be someone." I looked up from my computer, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile. The kind that made her pause, uncertain. "I'll be there," I said simply. "Good. Wear something nice for once. Try not to embarrass yourself." She turned to leave, then glanced back at my helmet on the shelf. "And maybe leave the garage sale props at home this time." After they left, I pulled up the CEO's email again and began drafting my speech. Every word I typed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd given away. They wanted to see what actual excellence looked like. They had no idea what was coming. The night of the gala, I stood backstage in my full-dress uniform for the first time in 8 months, and I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The Royal Air Force blues, perfectly pressed, the medals across my chest, each one representing missions I'd never fully talked about. The insignia on my shoulders that marked me as a squadron leader, and in my hands, that helmet. The same one they'd mocked, photographed, laughed at. Only now it was part of a display the AV team had set up, a full presentation of my service record, complete with cockpit footage and mission photos. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My breathing was steady. This was just another mission, and I never failed missions. Through the curtain, I could hear the ballroom filling up. 400 Vertex employees, executives in tuxedos, champagne glasses clinking, the murmur of expensive conversation. I peeked out and spotted them immediately. Front row, just like Rhiannon had promised. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, diamonds at her throat. Dax beside her in a designer suit, already on his second glass of champagne. Bryn in something silver and sparkly, phone out, probably live streaming to her followers. They looked so confident, so certain they were about to witness someone else's glory while they sat in their VIP seats and felt important by proximity. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The lights dimmed. The CEO took the stage, his voice booming through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have the distinct honor of hearing from someone who embodies the spirit of aviation excellence that Vertex was built on. A decorated combat pilot, a leader who commanded fighter squadrons in the most challenging conditions imaginable, and now a valued member of our own team." I watched Rhiannon lean forward in her seat, eager, excited. She had no idea. None of them did. "Please welcome Royal Air Force Squadron Leader Lennox Reed." The silence that followed was delicious. I stepped onto that stage in full uniform, and I watched 400 faces turn toward me, but I only cared about 3. Rhiannon's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Dax's jaw literally dropped open. Bryn's phone clattered onto the table. The color drained from their faces so fast I thought they might faint. Behind me, the screen came alive. Photos of me in the cockpit, helmet on, eyes focused, surrounded by millions of dollars of lethal machinery. Video footage of my squadron in formation, 12 jets moving as one because I'd trained them to, award ceremonies where generals pinned medals to my chest, mission briefings where I stood in front of maps and combat zones, making decisions that saved lives. And there, in crystal clarity on a screen 30 feet wide, was my helmet. That beat-up, scratched garage sale helmet, on my head during a combat operation, oxygen mask attached, visor reflecting enemy territory at 40,000 feet. I let the images speak for themselves for a moment, watching the room process what they were seeing. Then I stepped up to the microphone, and my voice came out steady and strong, carrying the weight of every mission I'd ever flown. "This helmet that some of you may have seen in my office has been with me through 47 combat missions." I paused. Let that number sink in. It's survived enemy fire at Mach 2. Every scratch, every burn mark, every dent tells a story of a threat neutralized, a mission completed, a life saved. I looked directly at Rhiannon. Her face was white as snow. Some people see scars and think weakness. I see them as proof of strength. The standing ovation lasted 2 full minutes. 400 people on their feet, applause thundering through the ballroom like jet engines at full throttle. Executives I'd never met were wiping their eyes. The CEO was clapping so hard I thought his hands might bruise. Even the waitstaff had stopped serving to watch. But in that front row, 3 seats remained conspicuously empty of applause. Rhiannon sat frozen, her diamond necklace catching the light as her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Dax had his head in his hands. Bryn was crying, black mascara streaking down her cheeks. I finished my speech talking about transition, about the struggle of finding purpose after service, about how the skills that kept me alive in combat were teaching me resilience in civilian life. I didn't mention them by name. I didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew exactly who had mocked the helmet. The Slack post had been legendary office gossip after all. As people began mingling after my talk, I watched Rhiannon try to slip out a side exit. She didn't make it far. The CEO intercepted her, along with the VP, her father, whose face had gone from pride at the beginning of the evening to something much darker. They disappeared into a private corridor, and I didn't need to hear the conversation to know what was being said. The next morning, I arrived at work early, the way I always had in the military. My office felt different somehow. Maybe it was me who was different. I'd stopped trying to be smaller, quieter, less than I was. The helmet sat on its shelf, and now, when I looked at it, I didn't see something to hide. I saw exactly what it was: evidence of a life lived with courage. There was a knock on my doorframe around 9. Rhiannon stood there, and she looked like she hadn't slept. No designer outfit today, just jeans and a plain sweater. No makeup to hide the redness around her eyes. Her hands were shaking. "Can I come in?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down like she was afraid she might break. "I'm sorry." The words came out rushed, rehearsed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was terrible to you. I was cruel. I held up a hand, stopping her. "You didn't know? That's your apology? You didn't know who I was, so that's why you tormented me?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Here's the thing, Rhiannon. You shouldn't need to know someone's resume to treat them with basic human decency. You shouldn't need to know they're a decorated war hero before you decide they're worthy of respect." I leaned forward, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't need your apology. I needed your respect. But respect isn't given to people like you. It's earned. And you haven't earned anything in your life." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I wasn't done. "I hope someday you find something worth fighting for, something that challenges you, that scares you, that forces you to become more than you thought you could be. Until then, stay out of my way." She left without another word. That afternoon, I got an email. Promotion to Senior Operations Director. Corner office. Significant raise. But more than that, a note from the CEO. "We need leaders who've proven themselves under fire. Welcome to the executive team, Squadron leader." I looked at my helmet, smiled, and got back to work. They mocked the helmet because they saw damage. They didn't see resilience. That's the difference between people who survive life and people who are handed it. I flew fighter jets at 40,000 feet. A few bullies in a corporate office? That's nothing but turbulence. And turbulence? I was trained to fly right through it. If this story hit you the way it hit me, slam that like button. Drop a comment telling me about a time you proved someone wrong. And subscribe, because we're just getting started. Remember, never let anyone make you feel small. You were built for the sky.